You're listening to the EntreSpirit podcast, where everything we talk about is related to entrepreneurship. Yes, entrepreneurship can be a crazy ride, but the good news is we're in this together. I'm Sarah Law, and here's your host and my husband, Matt Law.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Law. And we want to welcome everyone to another episode of the EntreSpirit podcast. As we all know, entrepreneurs are self-starters. They launch new businesses and expand existing ones. The question is, how do you know when it's time to launch or expand? Is today a good day, or will tomorrow be better? Now, at the time of this recording, we are 3 weeks into the war in Ukraine. Gas prices have skyrocketed. Inflation is at the highest it's been in over 40 years, and we're just now coming out of a global pandemic. One thing is for sure, uncertainty is something that all entrepreneurs will have to deal with. In today's episode, we're going to discuss timing and share some tips we've learned along the way. Stick around, folks. We got a great show for you.
You could have a job, or you can have a career, or you can have a calling. And the best thing is to have a calling.
Joy is the feeling that we have from doing what we are fashioned to do.
There is no such thing as failure. Learn from every mistake.
I'd write down my priorities in life, and I'd get committed to certain priorities.
It's kind of ironic that I'm a dropout because I read more. I like to learn as much as anyone I know.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. If you don't love it, if you're not having fun doing it, you don't really love it, you're going to give up.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to some crazy times. Hon?
Yeah.
It sure is. So over the last few weeks, I don't think people would have imagined we are going to be in a spot like we are with prices of gas being so high and an invasion of Ukraine by the Russians. I think this is something I don't think we thought we would see. I remember us talking about it, and we said, no, they're probably just bluffing. And here is a war with the Russians invading and gas prices and people are kind of on edge. These are definitely some crazy times. And as entrepreneurs, I think it's, you automatically question, like, is now the time to get started?
Sure.
Or if you're an existing entrepreneur and you had some plans to expand or to go go into a new market or to add on to it, there's a lot of concern, I think, especially after the last couple of years with the pandemic and all of that.
I agree. I think that those are things that people deal with naturally. I think there's always that question of, should I go for it? Should we expand? Sometimes, it's very clear and sometimes it isn't. And it can be scary for some folks.
Right.
And when there's uncertainties that are external, it definitely makes it difficult.
It's scary to start a business when everything is going well, but definitely when you take the craziness of our world right now, you're saying, hey, what should I do? So in this episode, we're going to talk about timing and taking that leap, starting a new business or expanding an existing one. Entrepreneurs they're always expanding and growing. So one thing we know is that if you do nothing, all right, and you never start a business or you never expand your business, that is a risk. Because if you don't do anything and step out, and then you decide to do it later, hey, there's going to be higher costs. Maybe you won't be able to capture the market share. If you are an existing entrepreneur and you don't expand or don't innovate and improve, competitors can come in and they may take the lead. So doing nothing, I think it's important to say, is a risk.
Very true.
And people say, well, if I don't start a business, I can just keep my job. But what people don't realize is even having a job is a risk as well, because what happens if your boss lets you go? So there's risk in everything in life, but there's a cost, I should say, a risk for not doing something. But on the other hand, stepping out and starting a company or expanding your company is also a risk.
There's also a risk with that.
Yeah. So what's going to happen with the economy? A lot of people are talking about how a recession could happen. There's the war, and what's going to happen with that? There's still, things lingering from the pandemic. And so one thing I just would tell you right up front, there is no perfect timing to start a business or expand it. And here's why: because you can't predict the future. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the next day. Now you can make the best guess, and you can look at some of the signs and try to learn from history and look at the data and look at trends. But here's the thing: you don't know what is going to happen in the future. There's been so many businesses that started up over the last couple of years right into the pandemic, and they did not see that. These people that, hey, I'm going to start a hair salon, or I'm going to start this, and you start it, and here comes a pandemic. So no one knows for sure what's going to happen.
That is true.
There's always a risk, whether you do nothing or you step out, there's risk because no one knows the future. So let's start off with a few misconceptions. And so when we would train entrepreneurs and literally meet hundreds of entrepreneurs that would come through our training classes, and just even business owners that we've dealt with through the years, you get to know kind of these people. And one thing I felt like they believed that they would almost have this aha moment, and they would be like, it's time now to start a business, or
the lights appear, the flashing lights, and
divine
and the
things
divine
happen.
word of, this is it.
This is for you.
Take
You
the
are
leap.
you are an entrepreneur. Yeah. So the truth is, you're never going to feel ready enough
So true.
to start or to expand.
There may be that one person out there that's like ultra brave,
1 in 100, right?
but
And usually
most people
when they're even
struggle.
acting like that, they're in somewhere deep inside. They're wondering, did I make the right right decision? So one thing I will just encourage you, there's not going to be a moment you're just going to say, boy, now is the time. And we're going to give you some tips for taking the leap before, you start out or you expand. So there are some things that you can do, but you're not going to feel this aha moment that, hey, it's time to step out. So another misconception is that when you say, hey, I'm starting a business or I'm going to expand my new business and do 2 shops or launch a new product, there's a misconception that most people are going to affirm your decision. So you may think when you start a business, all these people are going to rally around you and they're just going to buy your products and become your customers. And if you're expanding a business, that all your staff is going to love this idea. This is so good because the business is expanding. But the truth is, most people are going to be indifferent. And worse yet,
many will discourage you.
They'll discourage you. And
why do you think that is, Matt?
I was thinking about this because we've been doing some renovations at our nonprofit. And it's got a long ways to go, but doing some renovations and we're really proud of the progress. It's really come a long ways. And some people are like, well, what about this? And I don't think people intentionally try to discourage you, but they don't know how important and how much work and thought and just effort you've put into launching or expanding. And so people will say things kind of without thinking.
Right. It'll kind of deflate you sometimes.
Yeah. And so we're going to give you some tips a little bit later about how to watch out for dream killers, but don't expect number one, you're not going to feel this perfect timing come along, and number two, people aren't going to just rally around and cheer for you. Hey, you can do this. I mean, there may be one.
You may have a few in your corner.
That's what I would say.
But it's not the masses. I mean,
right?
You're gonna be like, oh yeah,
I
great,
think,
good
I
for
think
you.
You're
Go for that.
fortunate, even if you have one person.
Yeah.
Because in my life. Starting businesses, there's usually been one or two people, but I know so many entrepreneurs that don't have anybody. So for me, I had my mom, who's a big fan of just cheering us on. My brother, who's also very entrepreneurial, and you. So I mean, I'm surrounded, and I think that's been a huge blessing. But I know so many people, so many of the guys that we train and the ladies we trained, they just were really afraid because they were out there all on their own. And when they told people what they were doing, they said, "Oh my gosh, you're crazy." So
You're kind of crazy for doing that. Why would you want to do that?
yeah. So another thing that I think is a misconception of, launching a new business or expanding existing one is that people believe that they aren't going to feel any fear or worry or concern because, they're these, entrepreneurs. And the truth is there's going to be times that you are very, very fearful and you're unsure of your decision, yourself, if it's going to work. I think there's always a question inside of every entrepreneurial risk taker was that a good idea?
Right.
Is this going to work?
So then the person that does feel fear is normal then.
Absolutely.
Right.
You
So they can't say, oh my gosh, if I were really supposed to do this, then I shouldn't have any fear
I wouldn't
about
be
this.
afraid.
So
So
then that would be totally incorrect, right?
absolutely, absolutely. Every business we've started, and every launch we've done or expansion to a new product, which I mean, there's dozens and dozens through the years of ideas and things we've tried. We never felt like the timing was perfect. People were indifferent always. What are they doing now? And through all of those, there's been, is this going to make it? This is the difference in entrepreneurs that are all talk. So we've met people through the years that love to talk about entrepreneurship, but they won't ever launch because there's, they're waiting for the perfect time, and there's no perfect time. They're waiting for all the people to gather around and say, yes, you should start a business. And the truth is they're not going to do that.
Right.
And they're waiting for a time that they won't feel any fear. And, I think fear is a good thing. What separates dreamers from entrepreneurs that actually do business and start business and expand businesses is that they're not waiting for people's approval. They're not waiting for, everything to be perfect, and they're moving forward in spite of fear.
Right. They're doing it afraid.
And that's a great word. So there's no perfect timing. You can't predict the future. So let me just encourage you. Let us encourage you that you may be a little nervous and anxious when you're growing or expanding, but that's normal, right? It's okay, right? So it's still stepping out that makes the big difference. So let's talk a little bit and share some tips for taking the leap for some people that are maybe they're trying to time it perfectly, or they're thinking about starting a business, and let's give them some tips that may help them along the way to be ready. And if you have an existing business and you're saying, hey, should I expand or should I, innovate and add some new products or add a new location, let's give you some tips for that. And I think this first one is huge because a lot of reasons that people are afraid or they're nervous, it has everything to do with money. So number one is make sure you have your finances in order.
Yes.
So if you're going to start a business, one of the things that I had a mentor that really helped me understand finance. So there's obviously your profit and loss, like, how much you are making in sales versus what it's costing you in expenses. Profit and loss, you want to be in the black. Balance sheet, like that's important. Those are your assets and all of that. But one thing that this mentor really helped me with was to understand cash flow planning. And cash flow is where are you going to get the money to, cash flow out until your company generates enough profit. So let's just tell you guys, we had people in our training program, some of them would come and say, hey, what are you, what's your background or what are you doing? And they're going to start a brand new business. And this is a small, startup cost in a small business of consulting. And they would come and say, well, I'm doing this full time. And they have no backup plan, no cash reserves. And my heart would just sink because my first year consulting, I would tell, part of my story was we didn't make a lot of money that first year. It was in the second and third and fourth year that our revenues really grew. So when you start a new business and you don't have enough money saved, you've really just set yourself up for disaster, and you really have to plan out your cash flow. There's other things you got to think about is like insurance. We talked about that a lot, Sarah. Like how if you don't have insurance and you've got some major medical issues, how can you get insurance? And it's a lot easier now, thankfully, because of the marketplace. But I remember it took us a while to be able to get insurance when we had a new company.
Right.
Because we had to get a group plan. And so thinking about savings and just all of that. And if you're expanding in an existing business, you have to think about cash flow for, as you go to expand that business, do you have enough cash to cover that? And so one way to eliminate fear or reduce fear is to really get your finances in order. And maybe that means, hey, waiting a little bit. Maybe that means, moving some things around or selling some assets in an organization or doing something, selling some personal assets so that you aren't going to be stressed financially. And so, sometimes starting slower also will help that as well. So tip number one is to make sure you have your finances in order. And so we're starting a new organization, new business now, and we had to wait. These have been on our hearts for something to do for a while, but we've kind of had to wait because it takes money. They say, well, it takes money to make money. And there's a lot of truth in that because, unless you're doing some service-based business where you're just, you're going to start washing windows, and there's nothing wrong with that, then that doesn't take a lot of capital. It just takes a bucket, a few things, but it still takes something, gas to get there. And if you're doing that, you still can make money doing that. That's a lower startup cost, but some businesses take, capital to get started. So number one, make sure you have your finances in order. Number two, make sure you have enough time. And let me go back. I think I should share this story. Sarah and I, we were expanding our previous company, and we had some people that wanted to invest, and we had a business plan, and we were really going to do a bigger expansion, and we were raising money, and I don't remember exactly. I think it was about $300,000 we were looking for, and based on the business plan and all of that, we sent it out to the investors who said they want to invest, and we didn't end up raising enough money. And what I should have done in hindsight is said, hey, let's wait till we get the right amount of capital because of what I think it's going to take. And instead I felt pressure from the investors. And what I ended up doing was launching the business plan with less. And because we launched with less capital, I modified the business plan to where we didn't have as much staff. We did things, we put off some things that we should have done right away that would have generated more revenues. And so then later we got into a little bit of a cash flow problem because, and I look back at it, it's all because I started without what I knew we really needed for money. And so that was a huge lesson for us in that time. So number two, and I would see this with the guys we would train, is that they did not have enough time. Businesses take a long time to get started.
They do.
It takes a lot of effort and just you're learning, and there's work, and there's setting up systems, and you can seriously work a ton of hours. Now it sometimes isn't hard for entrepreneurs to work a lot of hours because it's their baby. They love what they're doing. And so they can work long hours, but it's going to take a lot of time. And we would have people come to training and go through our training program, and they're working 60 hours a week. And if you're working 60 hours a week and then you're going to try to start a business and you got 5 kids and an hour commute, I mean, how are you going to do that? How are you going to make a business or build a business? Even the simplest business is going to take time.
What would you suggest to a person that would be in that type of situation?
I think that's a really tough situation, but I think you have to wait until you have more time. And, sometimes that means that it's not time to start a business until maybe the kids are out of the house, or maybe you something happens where you get an inheritance or something, and you switch jobs. I think one thing people could do, though, is, I think this is important, is if you are working 60 hours a week for a set amount of money, find a way where you can make the same amount of money working less hours. And I think that's what's given us the ability to do what we're doing now too, honey. Yeah. You think about that, like we're able to not work as many hours and still make, a great living,
right,
and be able to work on the things that we're passionate about and serve, like helping the nonprofit, working, doing our podcast, doing stuff that may not bring in as much money right now, but it's something that we care about, and it's because we're able to make great money by not working a lot of hours at some of the other ventures we're doing. And so, you got to free up time, and you don't want to trade family time. You don't want to trade your marriage. And that we've seen so many people do that. I mean, they burn both ends of the stick. And, when you do that and then you add a business to it, it can be really, really stressful. I'm trying to think of just some of the people that we've met through the years. And I remember a guy who worked in like a real secure building up in Washington. I don't remember his name, but he had a 2-hour commute and then would be in the building, 8 hours and longer, and couldn't have a cell phone in there because it was like a top secret building and no phone calls. So like he couldn't run his business through 9 to 5. And I said, well, this is going to be, a challenge for you. He said, well, my schedule's supposed to open up. It's supposed to not be like this. And he never could get away from his job. And so it just made it really, really difficult to run a business. So sometimes saying no for a season, I think is okay, but time matters, and you don't want to do that. And if you have an existing business and you're like, well, let's expand, let's move on to something new, sometimes that can be really devastating if you expand too quickly. And I think we made some of these mistakes by adding new ideas, which hurt our core functionality in companies that we've had, because I had this idea, hey, let's get out ahead and let's try some new ideas, and we would expand, but it hurt our core functions in our business. And so I think that all means you got to slow down,
right? Because if the finances aren't there, if the help that you need isn't there, then it's going to be a struggle.
It's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah.
So these are some things that
those
maybe
are things to overcome. Yeah. And if you can identify those things, then you can make that your focus to overcome those.
Right. But those are things that definitely can be overcome. I agree 100% with you, Sarah. Like, so you get your finances in order. That's a timing thing, So maybe that's say, hey, let's wait, or maybe sometimes people's finances were there too, and they were still scared.
Right.
But some people have, $500,000 in savings, their house paid for, and they don't, all the time in the world, and they don't want to take any risk. That's a whole nother issue. So maybe your finances are in order. Maybe you don't need to make a lot, and maybe that should say, hey, it is time to expand. And sometimes as a company, like business owners, you guys that are business owners, you're sitting on a ton of capital. You're in great shape. Your house is paid for, your building's paid for, everything's paid for, and you're sitting on cash, but you're not going to spend that money to expand or to innovate. And eventually that can catch up to you, So sometimes you do have enough time and enough money, and you don't do it. And that can also be a negative as well. So get your money in order. If your money's in order, maybe it's a good time. Check out the amount of time you have available to work. And that may be a great sign too. So tip number 3 we'll give you is learn as much as you can before you launch.
Right.
And just study like crazy the industry. And it's a great world we're in now. There's so much you can learn just from YouTube and,
so much easier to
podcasts.
find out information. I love that.
It is. What's crazy is everybody's an expert now, though. That's what's a little bit tricky. But this is what I would say, like learn leadership, read books. John Maxwell's got a lot of great books. Patrick Lencioni, The E-Myth Revisited. Learn marketing, study business, study finance, and learn. And you guys that are existing entrepreneurs, that you're expanding your business, like there's other ways to learn, like through mastermind groups, through peer groups, by just even having lunches with other, business owners and other CEOs. You want to surround yourself with people that will, speak life and encourage you and help you learn and get further ahead. So we're in the middle of this now too, guys.
Yeah.
So we have a new business that we've purchased a domain, a premium domain. We've done some logo and graphic design work. And here's what's crazy is we don't even have a finished product yet. We're working on it and it's kind of formulating it, but man, we're hitting roadblocks. I'm getting annoyed because it's discouraging, because we will reach out to providers, or I would say manufacturers, and they just are like, they won't return our calls. Or if they do, if it's an email, they're short. And there's some people that want to talk to us, but it's to sell us on something, or to get us to go through some, I don't know, go through all these hoops. And so trying to learn that from in this new industry we're looking at, it's kind of hard. And it's discouraging, but I mean, every week I send more emails. I, read more blogs. I watch more videos. We're learning. We're
while
talking.
We're waiting, and while we're preparing, or while we're getting our finances in order, and just thinking about this, we're learning what we can.
You kind of have to be like, if you have something in your heart to expand as an existing business owner, or a new business, you're trying to dream up, you have to kind of be like a dog looking for a bone, like, because people, this is another, I think, misconception, is people think it's going to come easy. Information comes easy. And even in the information age, the problem is there's so much information, which means there's so much bull out there to dig through.
It's hard to find the right information.
Right. And so having someone to point you in the right direction, I think, is key. So if you have someone that's been doing that before, that you can have an honest conversation with, it's helpful. But I mean, seriously, you have to be like a dog looking for a bone to learn every day. And so I every day I learn a little bit more about our new industry. I feel very confident that's going to work and that it will grow, but we're definitely not ready to launch it yet, because we're still learning. And so, talking about knowing when it's time to learn, it's sometimes people can just study all the time and they know everything about, and they still won't start.
Right.
You have to balance that by you're learning and you're growing and you're reading and you're getting better and you're getting smarter. But at some point you got to say, all right, it's time to jump. And I think one thing while you're learning is you have to realize you're never going to be, no one's ever going to give you the title expert at that. When I was doing mortgages, I was a pretty young man, and I would study all the time, and I was definitely an expert in finance, in mortgage finance, and all kinds of finance, and how it would go, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines, and all of these things. But no one ever came and gave me the award local mortgage expert. Like, no one's going to stick that on my badge and say, hey, you're good enough now to start off. So you can't wait for someone to say you're good enough, or you're smart enough, or here's the badge, you're the expert, now you should start. That's all made up bull. You have to say, hey, I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to learn every day. And that's why your education has to be part of like the daily progress, the daily walk, that you have.
Very true. So Matt, tell us about the dream killers. You mentioned that earlier, and tell us what are the dream killers out there?
So taking a leap and you're getting ready to start a business and you're excited or you're getting ready to expand, there are people that will kill your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And we've met a ton of people along the way that will be negative and critical, and you share with them your dream. And so one tip we would give you is watch out for dream killers.
Yeah.
And I guess it's when you share information with somebody and your dreams and you're excited and they just rain on your parade.
Mm-hmm.
They can be really.
It's a real downer.
It is. It is.
It's a real downer. And you would think sometimes it's people that you would expect, to be encouraging. But for whatever reason, it could be lots of different reasons, they might not be. And so expect it. Don't let it derail you, and keep going. Keep going. Know that, okay, all right, that's going to happen. It's okay. I'm just going to keep going, and just be cautious who you share your dreams with.
Yeah. I don't know why people, and we were talking about this kind of even before we got started, why people, why there are dream killers. Because, here's the thing, you're an entrepreneur in heart, like you have the EntreSpirit, you're ready to start a business or expand a business. You want to keep growing, and you'll get around people and they will just energize you, other entrepreneurs.
Right.
And they're like, oh, you're doing this. Oh, you should do this. And two of them will get together. Three, there's energy that fills it. We used to have these at our conferences. And I was like, wow, I just didn't want the energy to end. But then you get around somebody else, even if they own a business or that, because I say this, just because you own a business, that doesn't make you an entrepreneur. Like you can own it and be a title, but you're not taking any risk. You're not growing. You just own a business, family business for 3 generations doesn't make you an entrepreneur. But what I'm saying is you can get around people, even if they own a business, and it feels so deflating. It feels so discouraging. They're so pessimistic, and you share your heart and your dreams. And then they're like, well,
they may find every reason for you to second guess and not step out.
Yeah. And if they have more success than you, that's the worst, because they can really crush your dream. So for example, say you want to start a new business or you're going to expand a business, and you meet another business owner, and maybe it's even in the industry of what you're talking about. And you share, and they've got the big house and they've got all the finances, but they're so negative and critical, they can really discourage you, And I think we should mention that sometimes family will be dream killers too, but they don't mean to be. Especially some family members maybe that you don't have a good relationship with. Yeah, they do mean to be mean. But people that love you and they really care about you, and you're sharing your dream, but they're not entrepreneurial, you have to understand they may not get it. And what they may be trying to do is protect you and saying, hey, be careful. And so you have to understand that just because they're not entrepreneurial, they are not trying to discourage you and kill your dreams. They're trying to protect you. So
right.
Give you a quick summary. Make sure you have enough finances. Make sure you have your finances in order. Make sure you have enough time. Okay. Keep learning as much as you can before you get started. Avoid those dream killers that will just really emotionally hurt you. And lastly, when it's time to start, I would just encourage you to set realistic expectations, because it's going to be a lot harder than you think it will. Expansion, starting a business, it's going to take time, and sometimes it's almost always harder than you think it's going to be. And there's going to be things that come up that you didn't see coming. And so if you expect it to be difficult, if you expect it to be, a bumpy road, then you're going to be better prepared,
right?
To overcome and to make it. So So at some point, everybody, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, at some point you have to take a leap. Unfortunately, there is no perfect timing in the world we live in. There's no time that you're going to say, hey, it's perfect. And even though it's crazy in our world right now, and there's, surging gas prices and inflation, and the housing is so expensive, and I mean, there's expensive groceries. Even though there's this crazy season we're in, I'm going to tell you, there's entrepreneurs that are going to start businesses, and they are going to flourish. They're going to do great. In the pandemic, there was huge opportunity. When you think about companies like Zoom and Peloton that really capitalized on the opportunity of the pandemic. But there's risk as well. So some businesses really took a beating in the pandemic. And so I just want to encourage you, everybody out there, there's never going to be a perfect time to expand. There's never going to be a perfect time to launch a business. It's never there. There's no perfect timing at all in this. And so you have to kind of go back to your gut. Like, you have your finances in order, you got time, you're learning. All right. You're avoiding the dream killers, right? You have the good expectations. I'd say, hey, it may be coming really close to do this expansion and, or to take a leap of faith and to put things together. But there's no perfect timing. And I wish there was, I wish we could see the future and know what's going to happen. But that's why it comes down to your daily disciplines of learning and growing and all of that. So anything you want to share else before we jump off here?
No, that's good. That's it.
So it's our mission here at the EntreSpirit podcast to encourage you. And that's why we do our podcast. So if you found this episode helpful, would you consider sharing our podcast with others? It would mean so much, as it would allow us to reach other listeners. Another way you can help is by reviewing and rating our podcast wherever you listen to it. That will help the algorithms and more people find our show. Also, I want to give you a great free offer as part of our podcast launch. We are giving away 1,000 copies of our new book, The EntreSpirit, The DNA of Self-Starters and People Who Get Things Done. Now, this is a full-length novel. It's a fable, and it's the story of a guy named Luke who kind of goes through some hard times and learns the EntreSpirit. The EntreSpirit is basically what we have seen in business owners and entrepreneurs over the last 20 years, and we kind of created it and put it into this book. So we are going to give away 1,000 copies of our book. We've purchased 700 Kindle redemption codes from Amazon, and we also purchased 300 newly printed paperback books, and we're giving them away for free. So if you fill out a form, you'll get emailed a Kindle redemption code, and then you can also buy or check out online for the paperback book. You only have to pay for the postage and the envelope, and we'll ship it to you guys. We also are excited to share that the EntreSpirit is available on Audible and iTunes if you like to listen to the book. To claim your free copy of the book, just go to EntreSpirit.com/free. That's EntreSpirit.com/free. It's important to note that the offer is only valid inside of the US. Unfortunately, Amazon won't allow us to give away these redemption codes outside of the USA, and we can't affordably ship the books outside of the United States, but you can still pick up a copy on Amazon. In closing, I want to remind you that Theodore Roosevelt once said, "Far better to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take the rank with those poor spirits that neither enjoy much nor suffer much because they live in the gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." The entrepreneur's life is uncertain. Its pages to be written as time moves forward. There will be moments on your journey where you're going to enjoy great success. You'll bet on yourself, defy the odds, and win. As Roosevelt suggested, there will also be setbacks along the way, and your wins will be checkered by failure. Don't give up. Never give up, my friends. Remember, you're not one of the poor spirits that live in the gray twilight of fear. You're an entrepreneur. Have a great day, everyone.
You've been listening to the EntreSpirit podcast. Be sure to pick up a copy of our new book, The EntreSpirit, The DNA of Self-Starters and People Who Get Things Done. For behind-the-scenes videos and more free resources, please visit EntreSpirit.com.